going to take a look at 21.3, rapid development in China and in India. We're going to describe how China has moved towards a free market economy without democratic reforms. We'll identify some of the continued challenges that China faces, and we'll explain how India has built up its economy. We'll look at some of the social reforms in modern India, and we'll see how these two countries have really emerged to challenge internationally for world dominance. Question 1. How did farming change under Deng's Four Modernizations program in China? Under the Four Modernizations program, communes were dismantled and peasant farmers were given a plot of land to farm. Farmers did not own the land, and the government took a share of the crops. The farmers could sell surplus produce and keep their profits. So it's kind of like a blended system there. 2, what details support the idea that the urban Chinese benefited from foreign investment? Coastal cities had a lot of foreign investment. The people who lived in them were able to buy refrigerators and television, cars, and things like that, basically consumer products that weren't actually purchased previously. And of course, their standard of living is uplifted quite a bit. 3, what were students and others protesting at Tiananmen Square in China? Students and others are calling for Chinese government to make some democratic reforms. The protesters wanted a democracy, and a lot of the protest movement was coming out of the college campuses in China. 4, how do you think the Chinese people responded to the massacre at Tiananmen Square? How do you think people around the world responded? You can see the tanks are rolling in. I have a close-up view on the left. The center picture is the tanks, one after the other, coming out of and down the street. And you can see the people who are gathered at Tiananmen Square. The gentleman in front of the tank on the left side there, he's nicknamed Tank Man, and he actually captured the attention of people across the world as he actually stood in front of that tank, refusing to move. A lot of people thought he was going to get just rolled over by the tank. Ultimately, the tank did not run him over, and the gentleman was kind of taken away, and we never really found out exactly who he was, where he ended up, or anything like that. But the shock around the world about a society like China just basically rolling in tanks and innocent people is disturbing, to say the least. 5, what are some of the effects that China is dealing with as a result of rapid urbanization? Urbanization is basically the people moving from the rural countryside in China into larger cities in China. Rapid urbanization caused many workers to have to work for lower wages. It also strained government resources. Over the course of time, people began to move from all around the country and into the cities. Also, too, as the population concentrated in cities, it began to spread disease, including a disease in the 1980s that was really problematic for much of the world, which is called AIDS. And then lastly, industrialization created terrible pollution in cities across China. 6, how is China's economy tied to the rest of the world? Well, China's economy is tied to the rest of the world because of globalization, meaning that countries and economies around the world are interlinked together. Couple this with international trade, and China is very dependent on trade around the world, as are countries around the world dependent upon China. When the recession hit, orders for goods made in Chinese factories fell, so China's economy suffered in response. So in many ways, China's economy today is very dependent upon outside countries continuing to purchase their manufactured goods. 7, how large is the population in China? And how did China attempt to control its large population growth? Some 1.3 billion people. They put in effect for a period of time the one baby policy in China, meaning that each family was limited to having just one child. 8, why did some people think that the one-child policy was a human rights abuse? What ways did the policy help China? Should governments worry more about individual freedoms or the good of society as a whole? That's kind of an opinion question. One could argue the one-child policy is a human rights abuse because the government is controlling a very specific aspect of a person or family's life. The policy helped China by keeping the population under control and low, and you can see the birth rate under the one-child policy went down quite a bit. The birth rate is in this color here, this darker orange color. So prior to the one-child policy, it was very high, 45 births per 1,000. And it came down quite a bit to a more stabilized rate of about 12 per 1,000, which is pretty standard for most countries, maybe a little bit high, but not super high. So the policy helped to keep China's population under control. Sometimes the role of the government is to worry about societal good over that of individual freedoms. Some could argue that's a dictator. Without this policy, the Chinese system would have been too strained right now. The country would be suffering instead of benefiting from a very strong economy. Many families attempted to get around the one-child policy, and there are some negatives associated with it. Some families simply hid extra children from the government. Some accepted fines or faced restrictions for having a second child. Others had abortions if they were going to, especially have a girl. Often a female baby would be sent to an orphanage. You got to remember that if you're only allowed one child, many families want to have a male so they can carry on the family name, the last name, the heir. Today in China, the population is a bit imbalanced as there's many more adult men than women. Once more modern technology came into effect too, a lot of families, if they were going to have a female per the gender identification prior to birth, they might abort the child and try again in hopes to have it a male. Sad but true. Next, move on to India. India builds a modern economy. Why did the Indian economy develop unevenly when it was socialist? India used a socialist model with 5-year plans for economic development. Some industries were built up, but India lacked many of the key resources necessary for economic growth, such as oil and natural gas. 11 lists some of the challenges that a modern India faces: pollution, rapid urbanization, a diverse population, widespread poverty, and the threats from Pakistan, all of which are on the table as far as issues for the Indian government to have to deal with. Other things you can think about with India: the expansion of cities, the pollution there. When you think about pollution, they don't necessarily have the same advanced sewer systems and garbage to pick up. A lot of things you kind of take for granted living in your home here in the United States today. These things sometimes do not even exist in your poorer countries, which of course is unfortunate. And when Pakistan, with its diverse religious population, in particular Muslims who are in many ways in contrast to the Hindu population in India and not necessarily looking to get along, that creates a lot of strife and conflict along the border. 12, in what ways did the Green Revolution benefit India? Okay, when you look at the Green Revolution, it increased agricultural output, provided food for more people. India planted high-yield crops, used chemical fertilizers, created a better irrigation system. However, it did add the challenge of urbanization. It added to the challenge of urbanization because it led many people to move to cities. Farm work after the Green Revolution required less labor, so there were fewer agricultural jobs. And for a very heavily populated India, this was somewhat problematic. This prompted more and more people to move into cities. Okay, 13, Mother Teresa is widely admired around the world. Why? Well, she became known, Mother Teresa, around the world for her charity work that she did with India's urban poor. Through the missionaries of charity, she provided food and medical care to thousands in Kolkata, and she is widely admired for providing care to many, many people. Very compassionate person. She He's considered a saint by many. 14, how has discrimination against women in India lessened? Okay, as we look at 14, urbanization undermined traditional ways of life. As more and more women were dealing with discrimination and unfair treatment, at least in the way of India. India was moving forward in recent years as women were granted equal rights and the girls in cities were now educated. Women began to enter more and more diverse professions or jobs. Indira Gandhi eventually won the position of leader of India. 15, how were the steps taken to improve the lives of Dalits similar to or different from the steps taken to improve the lives of women? To improve the lives of Dalits, India passed a constitutional amendment banning discrimination. Jobs and university spots were set aside for Dalits. The Constitution also helped improve the lives of women by granting them equal rights. However, jobs and university spots were not set aside for them. Lastly, the lesson reflection. Why are the large populations of India and China very challenging for the world community? As the only two nations with more than 1 billion people, China and India put a strain on all aspects of society, and they also pollute just by their sheer size quite a bit more than average, developed countries around the world. We also have large militaries and our military threats with their large standing armies and their weapons of mass destruction or their nukes. Global climate change is most detrimentally impacted by emissions pollution from these two nations. They both have refused to implement common sense pollution reforms. So here's some of the largest countries with the highest populations, including expected populations as well. So you can see China and India are pretty much even in terms of their population, 1.3, 1.2 billion. On the far side, you can see the expected population by 2050. China is going to remain stable while India is going to surpass China pretty significantly so by 2050. The United States population is moving up as well, approaching 440 million by the middle of the century. Indonesia, Brazil, Pakistan, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Russia, and Japan all rank out the top 10. That'll pretty much wrap it up for us. And until next time, Mr. Clarke is out.